All right. Hello, hello. Welcome. Okay, so we are going to look today at the new pope. I wanted to go live because the we've just had a new pope, and honestly, I'm very cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of young people out there who don't know a lot of, some of these basic questions, like what is a pope? Like what's the difference between the Catholic Church and Christians, Protestants? What's the difference? Some of these basic things. I also really wanted to spend some time looking at who this Pope is, because there's a lot of discussion, especially among conservatives, about looking at some of his old tweets, which is like it's kind of wild the world that we live in today, where the Pope is the one getting, the word's not doxxed, but like, we're digging into his old tweets to find the juicy stuff. But he's made some comments, some controversial stuff on Twitter, and so it's like it's public, it's fair game, right? So who is this Pope? What's his deal? And I think his name choice, the fact that he chose Pope Leo the 14th, he chose the name Leo. Why? Why did he choose that? There is some meaning. He has said there's some meaning. So I wanted to get into that, which leads us to a discussion of Catholic social teaching. Like, what does the hierarchy of the Catholic Church say about the way society should run, social issues, right? So if we're thinking in terms, which a lot of people have said, hey, the Pope is a religious leader. You can't think of him, in political terms. That's nonsense, friends. That is a load of malarkey. And there's guys out there like Nick Fuentes, who I'm not a fan of. Get mad at me if you want. Okay, I'm sure he says a couple base things here and there, but the guy is whatever. I'm not going to get into that discussion. If you're a fan, you can get mad. Okay. But I think it's a cop out for conservative Catholics to say, let's ignore what this Pope says about social issues and be like, let's not get into politics on that. I think that's a cop out, and it's a way to not discuss the subject. The reality is the papacy is it's not only a church. The Catholic Church is not only a church. The Vatican is a country. You talk about, oh, let's not get political. It's a country. The Pope is the head of state. Go look that up. If you don't believe me, he's the head of state. In fact, when there were some child molestation scandals in the past, related to the Catholic Church, one of the things that came up in the legal proceedings was the fact that the Pope cannot be deposed. He cannot be. You can't compel him to speak in front of courts because he has protections as head of state. That is like basically international law. You can compel, lower level people, but the person who's the head of a country does not have to go and speak in court. And so the president is exempt from that. The president of whatever country, and the Pope is essentially the president of the Vatican, the king, more like. And so he's head of state. They have their own bank. It's not just a church. They have their own bank, the Vatican Bank. They have their own military. Now it's kind of a ceremonial military, to be honest, the Swiss Guard, but they have it. They get ambassadors from the United States to the Vatican and vice versa, and from other countries, right? They have ambassadors to different countries because it's not just a church. It is a country. In fact, it is the smallest country in the world. To use biblical terminology, you might call it a little horn, but I'll skip that for now. I don't want people to get too mad at me. By the way, let me be clear up front. And for those who are watching, please let me know in the comments if you can hear me okay. I'm always checking the volume levels on this thing. And then people tell me later on, oh, it was too loud or it was too soft. Let me know. Okay, so I do not mean this, and I'm checking social media here to see if anybody is telling me, hey, this is too loud, too soft. Okay. I am not meaning this discussion to attack individual Catholics. Not at all. I was raised basically Catholic. I mean, I was a Mexican in California. You just like everything, everyone's Catholic there, just by default. And so I was, at Christmas and Easter, we went to the Sacred Heart Church in, Salinas, California. If that's where I'm from. I'm from a Chicano background. So don't get mad. Most of my family's Catholic. I don't hate Catholic people. I don't. This is not meant to condemn Catholic people. I think there will be a lot of Catholics, tons of Catholics in heaven. I'm not saying if you're Catholic, you're lost or anything like that. I do disagree with the teachings, and I think as adults we can sit there and say, "Hey, this is what you believe. This is what I believe. Let's disagree or just discuss these things." And so that's what I want to do here. And for those who don't know much about these subjects, especially the young people out there who are thinking like, "Okay, there's a new pope. What even is a pope?" Right? Like I'm a high school teacher, so I go back to there's no dumb question, and young people don't know this stuff. What's the difference between Catholicism and Christianity? I want to go into some basics of that. Obviously, we can't do everything, but I want to go into some basics of that. And then Catholic social teaching, which I think is very important. Matt Walsh, who I greatly respect, has been commented this last week on Matt Walsh and some of the other guys from Daily Wire. I forget the other guy's name. Not Ben Shapiro, the other one. I'm not a big Daily Wire guy. I do like Matt Walsh, though. And even though he's Catholic and I disagree with him, I respect his position on a lot of things. But on this, I think he just kind of, this is what the Catholic Church believes, and this is what it believes. And so, let's not talk about it anymore. Kind of. It is the way he's done it. So I think we do need to look into who this Pope was, what they believe. All right. So let's look at this. And my wife is telling me, I'll get you guys know the background here. There's somebody just posted a video on 20 differences between Catholics and Protestants. Apparently it was made by a Catholic guy. So maybe I'll look into that one and do a response to that one later too. But for today, let's just look at some basics between Catholicism and Christianity, and let's look into who this new Pope is. Okay, so let's start with who this Pope is. And his name is Robert Prevost. He has chosen the name Pope Leo, and the name Leo is going to give us some hints as to who or what he might be doing. So let's look at this. So Pope Leo, his previous tweets. So it's Prevost is his name. I saved some of them. Where is this guy? His name was Prevost. Let's find his Twitter here. Let's pull up the receipts on this guy. Robert Francis Prevost. So should come up as the first one. You would think the new Pope, but maybe they're trying to hide it. Robert Prevost. Did they lock his account? Where is he? Okay, this is him. This is his personal account. Okay, there he is. By the way, I want you to note the colors. That's scarlet. That's purple. That's all I'll say about that right now. Okay. So this is Robert Prevost. And this is, note the ceremony. Again, note the colors. Purple. Scarlet. This is the guard. You don't pay attention to them. But here's the new Pope. Here's probably a bishop, which all cardinals are also bishops generally. Don't have to be, but generally. This is the purple is usually what the bishops wear, and the scarlet is what the cardinals wear. All right, so there he is. Again, the colors. Why am I saying this? If you don't know why I'm pointing these colors out, I want you to go read Revelation chapter 17, verse 4. Just go do that for me. Okay. All right. Where are his tweets? Did he delete all his tweets? Oh, I'm going to have to go look at the bookmarks then because I bookmarked them. Yeah, this is his personal account. Wow. Did he delete them? Okay, let's look at his tweets. I'm going to do a search here because I bookmarked them. All right. I think he deleted all his tweets. Wow. Okay, well, I'm going to have to describe him for. I'll pull him up later. I mean, you could probably find this on the internet. Pope deletes tweets. Vatican deleted all tweets posted by Pope Benedict. No, that's Pope Benedict. Wow. I'm gonna have to. Is it Prevost? Pope Prevost? He deleted his tweets. Okay, here we go. His old social media. See if I can find him for you guys. Basically, he had old social media tweets where he was bashing Trump, things like that. Okay, here we go. Let's see if we can find someone who actually got it. In wokeness. Okay, here we yeah, this is gonna be covering some of them. I can't believe the tweets are deleted. That's wild. Yeah, okay. He's not a fan of Trump. He's not a fan of JD Vance. Not so great tweets. Let's see here. Posted screenshots. Let's pull these up. Let's see the screenshots. Make sure you guys are on the right one. Okay, cool. All right, here's the screenshots. Here we go. All right, so look, you can see here it says Robert Prevost reposted these things. So some of these were him reposting. Some of them were him posting himself. So these are some of them. All right. So I bookmarked it. I don't know why I couldn't find the bookmark. All right. JD Vance is wrong. Jesus didn't ask us to rank our love for others. That's referring to, what is it? Amori, the order of love in Latin, however you say it. It's a very common Christian teaching, and it's a Catholic teaching as well. So I don't know why the Pope is denying this, but he didn't like that idea. And the idea is like, obviously you love your child more than somebody on the other side of the planet. That's common sense. That's not the Bible. The New Testament teaches that. What is, someone who doesn't care for their own, especially those of their own household. That's Paul, right? I'm paraphrasing, but I don't know. For certain, he's attacking this because he's pro mass migration, move people from the third world to the Western world all over the place. That's one of the things he pushes. So that's a problem right there. Cardinal Dolan, why Donald Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric is so problematic. He posted this. So this is the new Pope. This is the new Pope. He posted these things. All right. Make sure I have this on the screen. Okay. And then there's a few others. It's stuff about like, okay, to my colleagues, your cowardice to act is not whitewashed by thoughts and prayers. None of this ends until we do something to stop it. So this is like, he's reposting Democrats who are like disagreeing with the Pope, and I stand with dreamers. You see the idea of the Catholic Church, not Catholic individuals. If you're a Catholic conservative, I'm not attacking you. But the Catholic Church as an organization has pushed for mass migration for decades, right? So they're behind the Dreamer stuff. Here's one on DACA. He's mad at the bad hombres comment, which, by the way, I mean, the Vatican has walls around it. So, and then here's the George Floyd stuff. This is very clearly, he is left-leaning. Now, my Catholic friends will say, and people who disagree with this will say things like, well, yeah, but he believes in marriage between a man and a woman. He's made some statements on that, and he's not into abortion. I think this is kind of a false dichotomy. I mean, and we're going to get into some of the other positions that the Catholic Church has, that the Pope has, and not just this Pope, by the way. I want to show you in this video that a lot of these teachings are core Catholic doctrines at the hierarchy of the church for centuries, decades. Um, the popes that you think, oh, well, that guy was a conservative pope and this guy was a liberal pope. No, no, no. It's all of them in recent memory have all been in the same accord on a lot of these core issues. So things like, and I'm going to get into this in this video later, things like redistribution of wealth. So we're talking a massive welfare state, take from the haves, get to the have-nots, tax the rich, give it to the poor. Also, let's have a ton of regulation so that the state controls what you can do with your property, with your business. These are core Catholic teachings. Now, Catholic individuals can disagree with that. You can be a Matt Walsh type and disagree with that. You have the freedom to do that. But I will tell you, whether you like it or not, the church leadership has spoken from the highest levels, like, the popes, multiple popes back for a couple hundred years have been in agreement on this for like at least a couple hundred years. Since capitalism in its modern form has existed, they've been in agreement on this. And I would challenge you to prove me otherwise. Show me a pope who is against redistribution of wealth. Now, there's comments about them opposing atheistic communism for obvious reasons. If you're a church or religious organization, you're going to oppose atheistic communism. But the idea of socialism in the sense of a redistributive state, that's core Catholic teaching. And I do not say this to insult. I simply say it as a matter of fact. So what has happened is with this new pope, we've kind of been given the impression that there's liberal popes and conservative popes. And Pope Francis was a liberal pope, right? You've probably heard that. That's due to his comments on things like gay marriage and social issues like gay marriage. And I don't even know, did he even comment much on abortion? I don't know. I think he did kind of a little bit in order to soften like the individuals, but maybe not the practice itself. But it's things like that, like marriage issues that will say, okay, there's the distinction between liberal, but they all, regardless of those issues, like on issues of, hey, should we have a massive welfare state? Should we tax the rich, give to the poor? Should we have a ton of regulations controlling everything you do with your property? They've been all in agreement on what you would call the left. I mean, to give you an example, this is why I have a problem with people saying, "Oh, this is a conservative pope, and the last one was a liberal pope." Imagine if Obama was was for, we know he's for a big welfare state. He's for, basically what we would call socialism light, not communism, but basically like tax the rich, give to the poor, all that kind of stuff. When it comes to economic issues, he's on the left. He's like a socialist. But if he came out and then said, yeah, but I believe marriage should be between a man and a woman, and I don't think we should do too much abortion, some, but maybe not too much. Would we then call him a conservative if he wanted to have like a massive welfare state, and he also wanted a new world order where the United Nations was taking over sovereignty over individual countries? Would we call that conservative? No, we wouldn't call that conservative. Not at all. Of course not. Maybe just on a couple social issues, but mostly on things like or family issues, but mostly on economic. No, you would not call that conservative. And that's basically what we have with these popes. It doesn't align with what we traditionally think of between left and right, because most popes are going to be, and most leadership of the Catholic Church is going to be against abortion, and for I'll say most for things like banning gay marriage, things like that. Not all. There's a lot of leadership in the Catholic Church who's for those things. But on economic issues, they're on the left. They're clearly on the left. So this guy, and when we talk about immigration, I mean, it's all right there. It's all right there. And so people like Nick Fuentes who say, hey, let's not make this political. This is politics, guys. You step into politics, you give your opinion on George Floyd and DACA, and let's keep all the dreamers here and open up the borders. And if you don't know, there's maybe some of you who don't know this, the Catholic Church's organizations, they're various nonprofits that are ran by leadership in the Catholic Church, have pushed for illegal immigration across the Western world, pushing all these modern like things where we're getting flooded with refugees and all these. A lot of this stuff is supported by Catholic nonprofits. That's just a fact. There's a lot of articles that have been done on that, documenting that. So, okay, not meaning to bash. So I feel like I'm bashing on the Catholic Church, but on these people. But I'm just trying to explain where we are. Okay, why did he get his name? Why did he take his name? Pope Leo. So he was Robert Prevost. Let's see, are we on the screen now? Let me make sure I got the right screen up. Okay. He took the name Pope Leo the 14th, and he did it because of Pope Leo the 13th. And we're going to talk about that guy. He did it because of the previous Pope, Pope Leo the 13th. And who this is this guy right here. Here's Pope Leo the 13th, whose birth name was Vincenzo Giacchino Raffaele Luigi Pecci. Popes used to be very Italian. It used to be a very Italian thing to be Pope, but now we got an American one. All right. He chose the name, he said himself, for various reasons, but mainly because of Pope Leo the 13th, and who spent much of his time as the Pope advocating for the right of workers during the First Industrial Revolution, which was also the rise of America. So this was the Pope that was around. So his pontificate was, he was elected Pope 1878. So America's rising to power till 1903. And this is like Industrial Revolution, America rising on the scene. What did the Catholic Church say about America as it was rising? That's interesting, right? And this was the Pope at the time, and he wrote about it. In particular, he wrote a letter called Rerum Novarum. Rerum Novarum. I'm going to show you that here. Let's see. So Rerum Novarum. Here we go. Rerum Novarum. It means the rights and duties of capital and labor, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that is what he is famous for writing this. We're going to talk about this a good amount because this Pope that we currently have chose this name because of this guy, and his most famous writings were on this book or on this letter. It's a papal encyclical. So we're going to talk about that a lot. I want to back up a little bit though, before we get into that, because it's going to be intense. I want to back up and talk about the differences between what it means to be a Catholic versus a Christian, Protestant. Some people will get mad at me for just saying that. Catholic versus Christian. Catholics are Christians. Depends on who you ask. People would disagree. You will see. How should I start this? Let me go into this common argument. You will see that there are a lot of nice Catholic people out there on the internet who, when you talk about these subjects, will say things like the Catholic Church is the original church. We are the first church. Protestants left us. We were the original church. We're the church of the apostles, and it's all been handed down from us. We're the original organization. That's the claim. Obviously, as a Protestant, I disagree with that. Doesn't mean I hate Catholics just because I disagree. If they can say we're the original church and you're not, and not hate me, then clearly I can say you were not the original church and I don't hate them, right? So let's be adults here. Let's just discuss it. We have a difference of opinion. I think if you look into history, there has been many studies on this. If you look into history, you will find that the Catholic Church did not exist for the first 300 years or so of church history, 400 years. It really started coming into its own around the 4th, 5th, and 6th centuries. But the first couple hundred years of church history, 200-300 years, didn't exist. And the way you can know that is you can simply look, and historians have done this. They've looked into it and they said, okay, look, did we have some of the distinctive teachings of the Catholic Church? Did they exist in the first 2 or 3 centuries? And the answer is no. You don't see any evidence for them. They didn't exist. The idea, and I'm going to pull up some of these things for you. Let's see here. Give you some examples. I'll give you some names of some places you can go for further research, because I don't have time to go into the all of the theology behind this stuff, but we'll go into some of it. Okay, church history. So I have some things on church history. Let's do a search here. So let's see here. Bear with me a second. I'm going to pull up some of these sources. Now I have plenty on what the Protestant reformers said, but I wanted to give you some church history. Okay. All right, here we go. So here's some names if you want to look into it. Michael Klauber, 2005, Post-Reformation Reformed Dogmatics, The Rise and Development of Reformed Orthodoxy. Then there's Gavin Roberts, 2014, Historical Argument in the Writings of the English Deists. Hold on, I want to put some of these on the screen. Well, it's fine for now. I'll put some of these also in the description as well, some of the links. Basically, and you can look this up yourself. Go ask ChatGPT, go do an internet search on it. What are the arguments? Ask the question, what are the arguments against the claim that the Catholic Church existed in the first 2 centuries? Ask that question, and you will see that there has been many research books and articles done on this who have debunked this idea. And what they've done is they've come in and they've said, look, a lot of this stuff, the idea of unbroken succession of here's one pope from Peter, and then Peter goes to the next pope and the next pope and on and on. It's nonsense. It didn't exist. There's no record of this stuff in church history. And then the idea that they had Catholic teachings, distinct Catholic teachings, just weren't there. So give you some example. This is from Peter Marshall. The Catholic Church's modern understanding of itself as the visible and universal body of Christ, with the Bishop of Rome at its head, is a post-medieval development. It does not go back to the 1st century. It didn't exist. It was made up after the fact, and then they rewrote history to go along with it. It's a post-medieval development, not a reflection of 1st century Christian practice. Okay, here's another one. This is Gavin Roberts, Historical Argument in Writings of the English Deists. This is Oxford, published in Oxford. So these aren't just little guys on the side, right? These are real historians. It says, what we find in the New Testament is not a hierarchical church, but a spiritual community. Very different from Pope at the top, I'm in charge, everyone obey me. Very different. The New Testament was very different. So rather than a hierarchical church, but a spiritual community, diffuse in its administration, so spread out, with no mention of papal supremacy. The Roman model was imposed retrospectively as memory ossified into dogma. It's really good writing. Okay. And then there's, a lot of the teachings that you think of as distinctly Roman Catholic just didn't exist in the first couple centuries, and definitely were not widespread. So you will hear a lot of nice Catholic people say, we were the first church. And the reality is that's not true. Let me give you an example. And this one is a little embarrassing for Catholics. So I don't mean this to attack, but I want you to, if you're an honest person, go and look these things up. I want you to look up the donation of Constantine. So Constantine was a Roman king, Caesar, leader of Rome, right? Constantine. Go look him up. He was supposedly one of the first Catholic. He was one of the first Catholic kind of minded leaders of Rome. And he was the political leader at the time, whatever you wanted to call it. And the idea of the donation of Constantine was this myth that was created, that there was a pope at this time and there was Constantine, the head of Rome at this time. And Constantine said, look, I'm going to go leave Rome and go move to the east. I'm going to create this new capital called Constantinople. It's named after him. And before I leave, I'm going to give Rome and all of its power, its authority over not only the church, but over the state, over the government of Rome. I'm going to give it to the Pope. And so it's called the donation. He gave it, right? The donation of Constantine. So look that up and you will see, if you do an internet search on this, there's paintings of it. There's paintings of Constantine bowing down to the Pope sitting on his golden throne, and Constantine comes up on one knee and he gives him this statue that symbolizes Rome. Master paintings done on this during the Renaissance and before then. And there's this myth that that's what happened. The whole thing is made up. The entire thing is made up. That never happened. Constantine never donated Rome to the Pope. It didn't happen. He was, Christian minded. He converted. There's debate about that. From paganism to Christianity, he converted, quote unquote. That part is true. But the idea that he legalized Christianity basically in the Roman Empire when it was illegal before, basically. It is around that time. It gets fuzzy, but that's the idea. But the idea that he gave Rome to the popes is the donation of Constantine. And it's something that the popes used as an argument for why they have their power for hundreds of years in their official writings, their papal encyclicals, the leadership of the church, cardinals and bishops and so forth. Not only them, but also the highest levels, the Pope himself argued that this was true. It was all made up. The whole thing. They rewrote history. It didn't happen. The donation of Constantine was a fraud. They had documents. They actually forged documents. The Catholic Church, their leadership, they forged historical documents, made them look old. Guys, I don't say this to attack Catholic people, to embarrass you or anything, but this is history. This really did happen. They took documents that claimed, Rome was given to the Catholic Church. They wrote them on themselves. They made the documents look old, burn the edges, kind of, put stuff on it to make it look like the document's old and it's falling apart. This is from the days of Constantine. He gave us our power. Therefore, you all have to bow down to us. I mean, I'm being a little facetious, but not much. That's basically what happened. They forged the documents. They recreated history. They lied about it and did it for hundreds of years at the highest levels. Why do I bring this up? This was proven during the Reformation and admitted now. It's admitted that they made this up. This is not up for debate. The Catholic Church basically admits, yeah, we did that. Those were forged documents. We didn't do that. The donation of Constantine never happened. And yet there's record that they said at the highest level it was true. So they lied. The popes lied. They did it for power. They did it so that they can say, the king of Rome, Caesar, whatever, he gave us the authority over all the kings in Europe when he left, and we are in charge. And now all you kings of Europe have to bow to us. We're in charge. And they did that for hundreds of years as the basis of their power. They lied about history and rewrote it after the fact. They came up with this idea after the fact and then rewrote history to go with what they wanted people to believe for power. That is exactly what the Catholic Church also does when they say that they are the original church and they have been there since the first century. It's not true. None of it's true. There's no proof of this. The idea that there was Peter and then and this is Catholicism. If you don't understand what Catholicism is, the idea is you have Peter as the first pope, which is not biblical, I believe. As a Protestant, I'm sorry, it's not biblical. You won't find the words Pope Peter in the Bible. You just won't. But they say Pope Peter was the first pope. They go from very vague interpretations of scriptures that aren't even on that topic. And they weave this theory that this idea of Peter was the first pope, and then he gave the succession of being the next pope to the next pope, and the next, and from the first century, we've always had a pope, blah, 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 from then until today. And that has been the original organization. That's the myth they've created. The reality is, much like the myth of the founding of Rome, if you look up Romulus and Remus, and they claim that they were founded by these twin brothers who were suckled by a wild wolf. It's all myth of the origins of the country in order to make the country seem more spectacular. It's the same thing with the Vatican. Their origins were all made up. The Catholic Church didn't exist for the first couple centuries. There were no guys walking around with the triple crown like this guy. See this here? See this crown he's wearing? There was nobody walking around with the triple crown saying, I'm the Pope in the first century with the golden throne. And there was no one walking around, bishops and cardinals wearing purple and scarlet. And there was no widespread teaching of things like purgatory or veneration of Mary, or the idea of, hey, I'm going to take this piece of bread and turn it into the literal body of Christ, and this wine, and I'm going to turn it into the literal blood of Christ, and you have to get this from the priest, and if you don't have access to heaven. Therefore the priest can decide whether or not you can go to heaven, because he can take it away from you. Those teachings didn't exist in the first couple centuries of the Christian church. Didn't exist. They were invented hundreds of years later. The whole thing is a myth. And so I bring up the donation of Constantine to show you it's been proven they've made up history before to fit their dogma. They're doing it again. They're doing it again when they say we were the first church. No, they weren't. When Catholics will say that very confidently, you can say back, prove it. They don't have proof because it didn't exist. In fact, let me give you one other evidence that should prove to you that the idea of the Catholic Church that exists today did not exist before the first couple centuries. The idea today of the Pope. So who is the Pope? The Pope, according to the Catholic Church, is the man on earth who represents the Son of God, who takes his place. So Jesus left this earth, went to heaven, and the Pope takes his place on earth. Excuse me. That itself, if you're a Protestant, that's blasphemy. No one takes the place of Christ. That Christ is God. You don't take his place. Nobody takes his place. But that's what the Catholic Church teaches, that the Pope takes the place of God on earth. That's just a fact. That's what they teach. And he claims to be the Bishop of Rome, so there's bishops all over the place, but he's the bishop of that area. And because Rome is the center of the world, he therefore becomes the most important bishop, and he is therefore head of the church. That's what they claim. That's what they teach. That's what the Catholic Church teaches. And for this reason, because he's head of the church, he is universal bishop over the world church. But, and this is very simple logic, right? That's what they claim today is the Catholic Church, is you have a universal bishop who is the Pope over the world church. Did you know that one of the men, so when they go back in their mythology and they say, hey, the Pope has gone back all the way to Peter, which is not true. They have a list of all the names of popes that they claimed were the heads of the church during the time. Of course, that's not true. There's no evidence of this in the first couple centuries. But they will give you the names and say, oh, yeah, this guy was head of the world church back then. This guy was the Pope back then. One of those names, Gregory the Great, said that the idea, so he was indeed Bishop of Rome, but he was not what we would call a Pope that was universal bishop. In fact, he said that the idea of a universal bishop over the entire world church, that is Antichrist. He said that. So here you have one of the men that the Catholic Church claims was one of the previous popes saying that the office of Pope is Antichrist. What does that tell you? That tells you that the idea of having a Pope like the Catholic Church has today didn't even cross their mind back then. They condemned that idea. Even the men that the Catholic Church is pointing to as the leader of the church, they condemn that idea. Okay. Again, I feel like I must apologize to Catholics. Again, I'm not trying to bash you as individuals. Please do not be offended as individuals. I have nothing against individual Catholics. I'm talking about the teachings. I disagree with the teachings. I don't think they're historical or biblical. Now, because I talk on political stuff as well, and this is largely a conservative channel, not dedicated Republican, don't misunderstand me. I have no loyalty to any party, but I am a conservative because I do believe that that America was founded on biblical principles, and conservatism is simply upholding the ideals of the American Revolution. That's all conservatism is to me. You can call it something else, but that's what I believe in the ideals of America's founding, because those ideals were based on the Bible. And I'm a Protestant. I believe in the Bible. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the social teachings of the Catholic Church. So we've discussed what the differences are between, well, by the way, before I get into that, forgive me. Another difference, a really basic difference between Christianity and Catholicism, is the Catholic Church teaches papal succession, apostolic succession. What does that mean? Those are fancy sounding words. What does that mean? It means the idea is that you have the apostles who Jesus chose, the 12 apostles, right? And God himself, Jesus is God himself in the flesh, came down, chose these 12 men. Therefore, you had God's approval on these men, right? And what the Catholic Church says is, okay, our leadership of our church are like the same thing as the apostles, in the sense that they're able to pass down the leadership of the church to the next generation. So here's the 12 apostles chosen by God himself. And then they just pass it down to, okay, here's the next group of leaders, next group of leaders. And so it's kind of like they piggyback off of the authority of the apostles. Jesus, God himself, put his stamp on the apostles that these are the leaders of the church and these are his sent, the people who are sent with the gift of being prophets and apostles. And then they come in and say, okay, well, now that applies to us. because, and this is where the myth part comes in, the apostles then chose the next guys and the next guys and the next guys. And we are the descendants of that hundreds of years later today. That's basically what apostolic succession is. That's why they call themselves the apostolic church. I don't believe in any of that. I don't believe the apostles chose their successors and those men had the exact same authority as the apostles, or anywhere close to it. I don't believe any of that. And I don't believe you can point to a succession unbroken from the time of the apostles to today and say, okay, there's the Catholic Church. I don't believe that's biblical at all. I believe the Catholic Church is an invention of basically the first. Let me give you the Protestant perspective of history. Jesus started the church and it was good. And he started it off as good as human churches can be. Because, we're fallen human beings, but it was in a good place at Pentecost. Right. And the church exploded all over the world. It was the apostles were alive during those times. They were doing miracles all over the place. The church was at its zenith. And then when the apostles died, things slowly start deteriorating and Satan comes in and slowly starts bringing things down. That's the history of ancient Israel. It's the history of the Christian church. Same thing happens. Moses starts it off good. After some time, right? They had to get through some bumps first, but by the time they marched into the promised land with Joshua, it was doing pretty good. Israel was doing pretty good. And then it slowly went down. By the time, the middle of Babylonian captivity, that Israel was horrible, right? It's the same idea. The church repeats that same history, starts off good, and then it starts to go downhill. Because that's what human organizations do. We get worse and worse, right? And as we got worse, as we were getting worse and paganism started coming into the church, that's basically where Catholicism was born, which is a mixture of Christianity and paganism. Lots of the teachings come from Roman paganism, and it's a mixture of the two. And that's just history. You just look at history. That's what they did. For converts, they were able to bring in all these pagans by changing their teachings and letting them be more pagan friendly. And today it's just a mixture of paganism and Christianity. Purgatory doesn't exist. The idea of the mass is not biblical. There's all these things, all these different things, baptizing infants and all this kind of stuff. And it gets deeper than that, but without going into all the theology, that's basically what happened. And then around the 5th, 6th centuries, because the Roman Empire was falling, the Catholic Church was able to take its place as the leadership of the Roman Empire. And it was basically invented in the 5th, 6th centuries. Didn't exist before then. That's the Protestant view. I think that's the best view according to history. Now, here's the difference between Catholicism and Christianity at its core comes to authority. To the Protestant, the authority is in the Bible. To the Catholic, the authority is in the leadership of the church. That is the distinction. To the Protestant, the authority is found in prophets. Why? And this is key. You have to understand this. Because a prophet receives their visions and evidences of their supernatural conversation with God. The prophet has supernatural evidence that God has called them and given them a message. Okay? Moses did miracles to prove that God was with him. Moses said, they won't listen to me, God. They won't believe that you sent me. And God says, what's this in your hand? Staff. Throw it down. It becomes a snake. Okay, so, and then he says, they will listen to you when you do the miracles. So the idea is God says, look, basically, I know that the idea that you have a message from God is going to be hard to believe. So here, let me give you supernatural evidence to prove that I sent you with this message. So a prophet has two things generally: a message from God and evidence, supernatural evidence that the message is from God, which is usually miracles. the supernatural evidence could also be the message itself, like a prophecy predicting the future, which man can't do by themselves. Okay. So that is the order of authority as Protestants see it. We see God gives the message to a prophet. The prophet has evidence that they are sent from God, usually in the form of miracles. But then it's more than that. The prophet's writings and teachings have to be checked by previous writings and teachings of all previous prophets. Excuse me. So everyone after Moses has to be checked by Moses. And everyone after Jeremiah has to be checked by Jeremiah. And so all the writings, they do not disagree. The New Testament has to agree with the Old Testament, and they don't disagree. A lot of people think, oh, the one disagrees with the other. No, they all agree because all the messages are from the same source, originally from God. That's the idea. So that's Protestantism. Authority comes from prophets, and that's only because prophets get their message straight from God. Okay? And they have evidence, supernatural evidence. And all the prophets' writings have to agree. In the Catholic Church, the idea is basically the leadership of the church replaces the prophet. So instead, in the Old Testament, okay, we want to know what God says, we go to the prophet. Instead, now you go to the church leadership. And how do they have their position as a church leader? Well, a prophet has their position because they're individually called by God and they're given evidence. The Catholic leadership, no, it's none of that. It's they were elected by fellow men to have their position. They don't need to give evidence of any miracles or anything. Just the fact that they are the administration of the church means that they're in charge. And so they replace the idea of prophets with church leadership. That is, in essence, what the Catholic hierarchy teaching is, what the Catholic Church is. It is we have replaced the prophets by the leadership of the church. We have the same authority, but we don't have to give, the evidences. In fact, we are higher than the Bible. We can rewrite the Bible if we want to. And many Catholic leaders have said that. Obviously, I disagree. And I'm going to go with, supernatural evidence of prophets and Bible writers. So, and look, you look at the New Testament and it's not about the individual leaders. It's about God. So Peter was checked by Paul in Galatians. Paul tells the story. These men were not infallible. Their message from God is what was. And so that's the difference. You don't have men that you have to follow. You follow the message and the message from God, and it has to have supernatural credentials. It has to be, okay, the prophet got this message in vision. There's evidences, there's miracles behind it, and so forth. Okay. I'd much rather go with that than just a man who was elected by a bunch of other cardinals. So, okay, moving on. So that is the essence of the difference of teaching between the two and where they get their authority from. Now let's talk about Rerum Novarum and the liberal teachings that are behind the Catholic Church. And this video has gone a little long, so I'm going to chop this up into pieces, but it's important to go over. I've been wanting to cover this for over a week. So the current Pope chose the name Leo XIV because of Leo XIII, who wrote the papal encyclical Rerum Novarum, which teaches basically socialism light, is basically what it teaches. It teaches, if you read Rerum Novarum, and Good luck trying to read it. I will show you. Here's a book. Get this on the screen. This is a book. It's called Ecclesiastical Megalomania. And this book gives the relevant quotes. Try to find it. It's hard to find. It's a fantastic book. It gives the quotes on what the Catholic Church teaches for economics and for politics. What do they think the economy should look like? The leadership of the Catholic Church, not the individuals, but the leadership. What do the popes say? What do the cardinals say? How should a society be run politically and the economy? Should we have a welfare state or should we have capitalism? What does the Catholic Church say? This book tells you. All the quotes are there. Should we have a king or should we have a republic? This book tells you. All the quotes are there. Ecclesiastical Megalomania. And if you look here, it says the economic and political thought of the Roman Catholic Church. That's what this is. Okay. So the quotes from Rerum Novarum, I'm going to be pulling from this book. And I'll just give you a rundown without reading all the quotes to you. The Catholic Church promotes labor laws. So like union type of laws, unions and regulations and all that kind of stuff. They like that kind of thing. Again, when I say these things, please understand I'm not talking about the individual Catholic in the pews. I'm talking about the leadership. You may disagree, but I'm saying this is what your leadership says. Okay. They encourage, they're for labor laws. They were behind the New Deal. So FDR, the New Deal. This is why I do not understand people like Candace Owens, Matt Walsh, people who are prominent conservative Americans politically, but also Catholic. I don't understand how you can be. I'm not saying they're bad people or anything, but I am saying, why? How could you believe in conservatism in America and yet have a religion that opposes it? And the average Catholic doesn't know this stuff, I'm telling you. So I'm not saying this to condemn the average Catholic, but I'm just saying, wouldn't you question if you are diametrically opposed in your views to what your church teaches? I don't know. I don't understand it. So here, I'll give you a quote. This is from, where is this from? It's from Newsweek. 1996, Joe Klein, he wrote, "The religion of Roman Catholicism, the most significant in American politics, the ultimate swing vote. Catholics were the heart of the New Deal coalition," blah, blah, blah. Okay. They were behind the New Deal, Catholic leadership. Now, let me give you a quote from their sources themselves. This is from Pope Pius XI in one of his papal encyclicals. And he says, he quotes Rerum Novarum. What you'll see is that all these modern popes, they quote back to Rerum Novarum. They'll go back to that pope. So Leo the 13th was very important. That's why Leo the 14th picked his name. And this is what you can expect to happen coming from the church, what they're going to push. Quote, "In fact, the encyclical Rerum Novarum completely overthrow those tottering tenets of liberalism." Now, don't misunderstand the word liberalism in those days. Classical liberalism. We're talking what the American founding fathers believed. That's what the term used to mean. American freedom is basically what that meant back then. It's like saying the word gay today versus the 1800s. It meant something different. It meant happy back then, right? Liberalism meant something different back then. Okay, so Rerum Novarum completely overthrew liberalism, which had long hampered effective interference by the government. That's a quote. So here you have the Pope Leo, saying that American freedom is getting in the way of effective interference by the government. They want government interference in economics. They want a big state to take over. How do we know that? Guys, the Catholic Church, this is very simple. You don't need to be a theologian or a historian to know this. It's very simple. The Catholic Church was in charge for the entire Middle Ages over Europe. What was Europe like during that time? It was feudalism. It was a controlled society. You had all these rights, but you were a peasant. That's very similar to what we're seeing today. The left pushes for human rights. We need a right to education, a right to this, right to this, right to this, right to this. But you're also going to have nothing and be happy. You're going to be a peasant and be poor, but you have a ton of rights, right? That's the idea. That's what feudalism was. Just go look up feudalism. It was not a good thing. You were a peasant. It was not good. You were basically a slave to the state working for your bread, and you like own nothing. That's the system that was in place when the Catholic Church had control over all of Europe. That's what they want to go back to. In fact, they talk sadly about how things have changed. All right. What else do we have? So they want interventionism. They use Catholics, elite Catholics, to go into other governments and make Catholic style laws for like a welfare state. So here's another quote from Pope Leo the 11th. And this is from I can't even say these Catholic terms right. Quadragesimo Anno. Pope Leo the 11th. Page 46 on this book, Ecclesiastical Megalomania. It says they encourage the elite among Catholics to give such efficacious help and assistance to the rulers of the state. And in legislative assembly, they were not infrequently the foremost advocates of the new policy. All right. So that's what they want. They want to use Catholics to go into and push new policies. Now, here's a key. They opposed laissez-faire capitalism, which means just free market capitalism. They oppose that. Instead, what they want is basically a form of economic fascism. People get mad at this word, but when you look into what it was historically, what fascism was, it was you can keep the title to your property. You can have the idea that you own things, but the state is in charge of how you can use them. So really you don't own it. So you can keep your business. So fascism was in contrast to communism. Communism, the state owns all the businesses, right? They own all the factories. They own everything, right? Fascism was different. Fascism said, look, when the state owns everything, when they own all the factories and they own the bread factory, for example, and it fails and millions starve, the state is kind of to blame, right? So let's have another idea that'll be smarter. This is what the fascists figure out, which all the fascists in Germany and in Italy were all socialists. That's history. I'm just talking historically. They were all socialists before they invented fascism. And the father of that was Gentile. Go look him up. Giovanni Gentile. So they said, instead of having all the state control everything, what we're going to do is we're going to have the state will let you have your own businesses and your own private property, but we're going to tell you how you can use them. We're going to decide how much stuff you're going to make in your business, what you're going to charge, how much you pay your workers, how much you charge for the prices, blah, blah, blah. We are in charge of everything. And you're really just a manager. And we tell you how to run it. You have the downside of if anything goes wrong, you're to blame, but you don't have any control. So what they did is they separated property ownership from actual use. You don't get to control anything that you quote unquote own. That was the brilliance and the devious evilness of fascism. It was total state power while appearing to look like it was capitalist. That's the idea. They didn't come up with this themselves. This was something that the Catholic Church, that the papacy came up with. So here's a quote. This is from Pope John Paul II in 1987. He wrote in his encyclical on social concern, he wrote, "It is necessary to state once more the characteristic principle of Christian social doctrine. The goods of this world, so that would be property. The goods of this world are originally meant for all. The rights of private property, or the right of private property, is valid and necessary, but it does not nullify the value of this principle. So, in other words, you can have private property, but really everything in the world belongs to everyone. So just because you have private property doesn't nullify the principle that really everything belongs to everyone. Okay. You see there was a problem, right? So again, here's another quote. This is from Pope Paul VI in 1967 on the progress of peoples. He says, quote, all other rights whatsoever, including those of property and free commerce or the free market, are subordinated to this principle. And that's the principle of everyone owns everything. So again, we see a distinction between, yeah, you can own it, but not really. You don't get to control what you actually do with your goods. That is in essence what the economic theory of fascism was. Now, this is what they said. It's one thing for what they say repeatedly, right? It's another thing for what they do. And when the two are in agreement, you can be sure that there's no question about what they believe. Let me put that another way. The Catholic Church leadership, the popes, have said what they believe the economy of countries should look like. If you doubt that and you think, oh, maybe Joshua's just maybe Joshua's misunderstanding it, well, then there's another way to see what they believe, and that is go look at what they do. What does the Catholic Church do when they control a country or countries? What does the economy look like? And I'll give you a couple examples. I already gave you one, feudalism. That's what it was like during the Middle Ages when the Catholic Church was in charge. Over 1,000 years in Europe during the Middle Ages. Feudalism, that's what they did when they were in charge. Okay? And they're sad that feudalism is now gone. So do I have the quote on that? Yeah. I don't want to read the quote. It's fine. I don't want to read you too many quotes. I'll give you another example. The Jesuits, which is a Catholic order of priests, had control basically of large portions of Paraguay in decades past. You can look this up. Go do an internet search. They were called the Reductionists. Just look up Jesuits in Paraguay. Reductionists, if you can remember how to spell that. Reductionists, Jesuit reductions in Paraguay. That's what their communities were called. They installed a complete dictatorship when they were in charge. Complete dictatorship. They controlled everything. This is how much you can sell it for. This is how much you charge. This is what they just controlled everything of the economy of the peasants, the natives of that land. The Jesuits just control. It was a top-down controlled economy. Instead, they don't know none of the free market stuff that we believe in America. No, that's fascism. That's whatever you want to call it. It's socialism light, whatever. It's totalitarian, whatever you want to call it. It's control. It's the opposite of free market and then what we created when America was founded. It's the opposite. So there's another example of what they did. Again, there's what they say and then what they do, and the two are in agreement. Okay, let me give you another example. People are going to get mad at this one, but this is history. In fact, I have a book on it. Grab the book. Hold on, I'm right here. This is, here we go. Got it. Whew, people are going to get mad at this one. Go read it. This is history. This is actually written by a Catholic. Hitler's Pope. The Secret History of Pius XII by John Cornwell. Hitler's Pope. During the rise of fascism in Germany and Italy in the 1930s, the two most Catholic countries in Europe, basically, were Germany and Italy. Catholicism was huge there. It was the dominant religion in those countries. Dominant politically also. And the papacy during that time, the Vatican, made a deal with both Hitler and Mussolini. Gosh, it used to be a time you can just discuss this stuff freely and just because it's just history. I'm not saying they were bad. Obviously, I'm not a fan of either of them. But nowadays, we have to be worried saying these things on YouTube. Hopefully, I don't get in trouble just for using those names, right? But the point is, if you have a country that is dominantly the majority of the people there were Catholic, the leadership, and then they make deals with the Vatican in order to come to power. So Pius XII made deals with the leadership of Germany. I won't even use the name anymore because you guys knew what party it was. Starts with an N, right? He made deals with them to come to power. The basics of that government reflect. I'm trying to put this in a way that's not going to be too controversial. They were Catholic countries when those people came to power. Okay, let me put it this way. There's a quote, and this will summarize what I'm trying to say. There's a quote from the Jesuit official magazine. I forget the name of it. It's called the House Organ, which means the official newspaper of the Jesuits, which is the Catholic order. And they said that fascism is the regime that most closely responds to the principles of the Church of Rome. That's almost a direct quote, if not direct, if not exactly right. I might have gotten a word wrong. They said that the principles of the Church of Rome, the Catholic Church, are reflected in fascism. Now, they're talking about the economic system, the totalitarian style of the state, what I'm describing. They're not talking about some of the worst atrocities that the N party did. So don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to say that. That's not what I'm trying to say. Don't misunderstand me. And they said these things probably before that happened. But they were saying, look, the idea of a totalitarian society like the fascists set up, that is what the Catholic Church believes in. Not a free market, classic liberalism like we had here in America. It's the opposite. So again, just to summarize, what they have said and what they do in 3 separate examples over hundreds of years are the same thing, and that is a big government controlling all aspects of society. That's what they believe. It's the opposite of American freedom, which again is why I don't understand why intellectual conservatives like Candace Owens or Matt Walsh can be Catholic and conservative at the same time. I'm not condemning them. I like Matt Walsh. I just don't understand the cognitive dissonance, because if you look at what the Pope said when America was founded, they were very anti-America, anti the freedoms we have here in this country. Why would you, if you believe in those freedoms, why would you be that religion? I don't understand it. Or don't be a conservative. Like, I don't know. It's cognitive dissonance to me. Here's a quote. This is from Thomas Aquinas, I believe. Again, and I'll finish up with these. We're almost done here. Again, the idea of separating property, what you have and own versus what you can do with it. Here's the quote. I believe this is quoted on page 52 of that book I just showed you, or the first book I showed you. It says, quote, "The right of property is distinct from its use. I'm not making this up. That's what they teach. The right of property is distinct from its use. It's different than whether or not you can use it. You can own it, but the way you use it, the government gets to tell you. Here's another quote. How ought man use his possessions? The church replies without hesitation. Men ought not regard external goods as his own, but common. So the stuff that you own, you don't really own, it's common. Now, this is probably things that a lot of Catholics have never heard. So again, I'm not condemning you. How would you be responsible for something you didn't even know your church teaches? I'm not condemning the individual Catholics. Good people, don't know any better, never heard this stuff. But this stuff is real. And so don't get mad at me for quoting it. I'm just quoting it. Okay, so we got somebody here who says stories, conspiracy theories, nothing reliable to back up, no scriptures based. With all due respect, you're wasting your time. Everyone can say or write anything. It doesn't mean it's true. I'm quoting the popes. I don't know what to tell you. Quoting the popes. I'm going to go look up the donation of Constantine. It's not made up, guys. It's not made up. I don't know what to tell you. The donation of Constantine scandal did happen. They did make up that history. All right, and I have some other quotes here. People are mad at me in the comments, but none of these are really worth responding to because there's not really any arguments of substance. I'd be happy to answer any arguments of substance if you have any specific things. But for now, all I did was present quotes from the Catholic Church and some historical explanations of things. And I'd challenge anybody who disagrees with me here to tell me what specifically I have said that is wrong or that is not historically accurate. Again, I recommend everyone get a copy of this book. It's tough reading. And it's written by a Catholic. The guy is Catholic. He's a Catholic scholar. Not only is he a Catholic scholar, he was an Oxford scholar. What this guy did is he heard that the Pope during the time of the H guy, which shall not be quoted, the German H guy, his name started with an H, that the Pope during that time was being attacked by the Jewish community for basically collaborating with that guy and working with him. And so they said, hey, he bears some responsibility. And so this Catholic scholar, John Cornwell, he said, look, I'm sure this isn't true. Let me go to the Vatican and let me look at your historical document, your archives, and I'll prove that he's not guilty of working with these horrible people in Germany in the 1930s. So the Vatican said, oh, you're going to help us? Sure, come on in, check out our documents and prove that we're innocent. And what he found was worse than the accusations. And then he wrote a book on it. And they allowed him to publish it. I believe it even has the imprimatur on it. Anyway, he's got all the sources from the Vatican archives. I mean, it's just reality. It's what happened. It was pretty ugly. So anyway, the end of the day, individuals, and let me wrap it up with this. Individuals are not horrible people for being Catholic or not. I'm not condemning any individuals. But I do think people need to understand what this church actually teaches, what their history is, and you will encounter nice-meaning Catholics who will repeat this idea that the Catholic Church is the original church, and we've always been there. And historically, it's just not accurate. It's as made up as the donation of Constantine was made up. And there's conservative Catholic figures today, like Candace Owens and Matt Walsh, so forth, John Knowles, or Michael Knowles, that's his name, who will try to make the Catholic Church appear as if it aligns with conservative principles, but the reality is they're very far apart. To be an American conservative, to believe in a free market and freedom of speech and all these kind of things, all you got to do is look into history of the Middle Ages and what it was like. And you couldn't own a Bible. It was in the language that that the common person could read. That was outlawed by the Catholic Church. Like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of free markets, right to property, all those kind of things that we take for granted as Americans and as conservatives, those were out the window when the Catholic Church was in power. So I don't understand how you can believe one, be an American conservative and a Catholic at the same. I don't understand how you can put the two together. People do it, but to me, it's cognitive dissonance. It doesn't mean they're bad people. I'm not trying to say anyone's bad. It makes no sense. And I do believe that the Bible teaches something very different than what the popes teach and is more aligned with the principles that America was founded on. Freedom, a God who says, come now, let us reason together. And you as an individual, I'm trying to speak to you directly. You don't need to go through priests and popes and so forth. That's what I believe. You get mad at me if you want. But that's what I believe. All right. We're going to end it there. It's been a good discussion. And hopefully people won't get too mad at me and really just see that I'm trying to have an adult conversation. Take care. God bless. We'll see you next time.